Over the last 3 days I already talked about frame rates, microphones and stabilizers, but I did not talk about one of the most important parts of filmmaking and photography, the camera itself. Today that is going to change. There's this very popular saying, and I keep coming back to it. I first heard it from Chase Jarvis, a very famous photographer, and it basically says, the best camera is the one you have with you. And that is partially true, and I really believe that is the case, because sometimes you only have your phone, but then you will have to make it work with your phone. But sometimes you actually can bring bigger cameras, and that makes a lot of sense as well. But the problem is, which camera do you actually choose? Obviously, there are multiple factors to be considered: price range, weight, how much equipment do you need to actually get the footage you want? Do you need different lenses? Do you need external microphones? Do you need a flip out? There is so many options, there's so many possibilities. And then of course there's also the different qualities and the different makers. About a half a year ago, I personally switched from a Canon 5D Mark II to a Sony A7 Mark II. And since then I have pretty much only looked at the Sony market, because now I have Sony lenses and that makes a lot of sense. But the other camera makers like Nikon, Olympus, Panasonic and Canon all have very amazing cameras, and some of them are actually going to be in my list. One thing that recently happened is that a couple days ago we sat at a table and we discussed different cameras, especially for small trips and for you personally to kind of document your travels with pictures that are nicer than with a phone, but still not a big hassle to take, and you still have the option to kind of have video as well. So in doing that, the limitations were pretty clear. It should be rather cheap, it should be easy to handle, and maybe even give the opportunity to have a flip out screen or something like that. The first set of cameras in that line would be to just take your phone. That is the simplest. You don't have anything extra. You can get an external battery to actually last throughout days of shooting photos and traveling around. You have much more possibilities on your phone as well. You can upload it instantly to Instagram or other platforms. You can also edit your photos with amazing apps like VSCO or the Snapseed from Google, and I have made a video about that, and that is linked up here as well. But then maybe you want to go into the water, and then of course there's the GoPro. I think the GoPro Hero 4 Silver is a great option because it already has the screen. Or of course the GoPro Hero 5 Black. It has the screen, it is the newest model, and it also offers some kind of stabilized footage internally. And nowadays they also have the linear style for this not so GoPro-y looking kind of footage. But both of these systems have the problem that the sensors are really small. But if you want to go into the bigger sensor systems, you obviously have to pay more. But one camera that we found while doing the research, and the topic actually came up, was the Alpha 5100. It sounds like a really good camera. It offers stabilization if you have it in your lens. It has the flip up screen, so you actually can photograph yourself very easily, or you can even use it for vlogging. It has more than 20 megapixels, which is plenty to take nice photos, and you can obviously also film in nice full HD. One downside, if you watched the microphone video, this camera actually does not offer a microphone jack, so you cannot use an external microphone with that camera model. If you're looking at the newer versions, like the Alpha 6500 for example, then you would have that option as well. All three of these systems are kind of under 1,000 euros, or maybe even under 500, because the GoPro is under 500, the Alpha 5100 is also under 500 US dollars, and if you look on the used market, it's even cheaper. Of course, with the Alpha 5100 you also get the options for different lenses, and I will make a video about different kinds of lenses in the future as well. The next step in terms of price range would be 1,000 to 2,000 euros or US dollars, and there I found the RX100 Mark V and as well the Sony A7 Mark II, which I'm filming on right now. Both of these cameras are widely different. The RX100 is a compact camera. You cannot switch the lens, you cannot switch the microphone. It has this really interesting form factor. It's really small, it's lightweight, it's easy to use, and it shoots great footage as well, especially in terms of slow motion and also the 4K options. And I see this camera a lot also used as a vlogging camera on YouTube. The Sony A7 Mark II on the other side is a full-frame camera. It has a much bigger sensor, even bigger than the APS-C sensor, which is built into the Alpha 5100. It is a really nice sensor. You can get a really shallow depth of field. The lens choices for the Sony system are pretty much endless. You can use the native Sony lenses, you can use the native lenses made for the Sony E-mount from other makers, and you can also use adapters to actually use, for example, Canon lenses or the with the Sony system as well. For example, I personally use the Sigma 35mm 1.4 with an adapter on this camera because I have the Sigma with a Canon mount and they don't make a E-mount version of that lens. And the Sony A7 system is really interesting, hence why I chose to kind of go into that route. It has the Sony A7 Mark II, it has the Sony A7S Mark II, it has the Sony A7R Mark II, and all of them are kind of made for different purposes. The A7S is a video camera, mainly. The A7R is a photo camera, which is like incredibly many megapixels, and you have the A7 Mark II, which kind of lays between the two, and I would say it is the starter camera. If you don't really know if you want to use video or you want to make photos, I would go with the A7 Mark II. And this camera actually runs about 1,200 euros without a lens, and that is the one I bought last year. Going up from there, I would say there are two cameras that are really interesting. There's the Sony Alpha 6500, which is the newest version of the Sony APS-C sized cameras, and that is really cool because it has a nice form factor. It's a little smaller than the Sony A7 system, but it can use the same lenses, and it also can use the cheaper Sony lenses that are made for the APS-C sensor size. That is really handy because the lenses are also lighter in terms of weight. They tend to be a little cheaper because they are made for the APS-C sensor sizes, and I would definitely look into those as well. The only problem is that I personally fell in love with a full frame sensor size, and since then I have not been looking back, and I've sticked to the Canon 5D Mark II, which is full frame, and the Sony A7 Mark II as well, which is full frame. Then we have this kind of new camera, the Panasonic GH5, and I have heard many things. I have seen a couple people pick them up. I have not personally tested that camera, but it seems to be a really good camera except for autofocus, which kind of is not really nice because I think autofocus is something that is really important nowadays, but it is also something that might be able to be fixed in firmware upgrades. I don't know that, but it is a very interesting camera, and I am someone who is kind of stuck with one system because I don't really want to change all the time. There are people who kind of see a new camera, they instantly buy into the new system, or they sell all their stuff and then they buy into this new system. I'm not like that. I'm kind of sticking with my choice here, and I'm sticking with the Sony A7 system for now. But it is a very interesting camera, and I would definitely take a look because it is way cheaper than the A7S Mark II in terms of camera, but I see many people comparing the GH5, including a lens, with the Sony A7S Mark II, which is like the flagship film camera from Sony in the A7 line. Then if you have a budget that is between $3,000 and $10,000 US, I would say there are practically two choices that I personally would go for. If I would have the funds, I would instantly go for a Sony A7S Mark II to kind of complement my current filming camera. The A7S Mark II is an incredible camera. It can do the internal 4K, it can do 120 frames per second with full HD, and it has the same Sony mount that I am currently using. Now, if I would have completely new choices, I would go for the Canon 1DX Mark II, which is a beast. It is a really heavy camera, it is a bigger camera, it is still a mirror-focused camera, so it actually has a mirror, and it is a DSLR and not a mirrorless. So that is a choice that is also very interesting. But for me, buying into the 1DX would mean carrying a lot of more stuff because the lenses are sometimes heavier, the camera itself is much heavier, and it also would mean I would have to get a lot of new stuff. And the camera itself costs around 6,000, and getting the lenses I would be interested in would mean about 2,000 or 3,000 additionally. So I would go around 10,000 already to kind of upgrade to that system. But it would be kind of a dream kit if I would not care about the weight that much. And then from there we have 10,000 plus. The Red, for example, is a great camera you can pick up there, but it is a camera that is pure insanity in terms of picture quality and also in terms of weight. You have to lug around a lot more than just with those mirrorless cameras, for example. But for me right now, I would say smaller form factor is still key. So the A7 system or even the Alpha 6500 system is something that is really interesting because they have small lenses, they have great glass, they have great quality in terms of picture quality, and they still have this kind of lightweight system around it, so you can actually carry it in your travel bag. If I would go for a completely new system, don't have anything, and would right now start out with less than €1,000, I will be making a video about that. But the basic choice would probably be around the Alpha 5100, including 1 or 2 prime lenses and also a GoPro Hero 5, because that just gives me much more options in terms of underwater. Also kind of like this vlogging style, many people use that as well. And then you have a great system for around $1,000 and you can take amazing pictures with 20 plus megapixels. You can get great footage in terms of video quality, and if you get the right glass, I think that is a really nice system. Obviously, upgrading from there is always possible, and spending more is always possible as well. But in the end, it is very true. The best camera is the one you have right now, because you can take pictures with it, and longing for the newer camera, the better camera, the bigger camera might not actually help in terms of picture quality. But if you already have a camera, maybe getting a new lens is something that is actually interesting. And for me, for example, that is something that changes my life continuously. Just recently I bought into the Sigma system with the Art Series 35mm 1.4 lens, and it is fastly becoming my new favorite lens, especially for photography. For video, I think the wider is still something that I'm really fond of, but for photography, the 35mm on a full frame sensor sound incredible and they just take nice pictures. I really like that combination. I hope this video was helpful for you. Please, if you have any camera related questions, leave them in the comments down below. If I can help you make a better choice, that is really something that I'm looking forward to do. If you choose one of these cameras or want to learn more about them, I have links in the description down below to Amazon. Those are, as always, affiliate links. If you buy through those links, you help me create more videos like this. If you want to not do that, just Google them for yourself and you can find them. And as always, I recommend to check out the used market, because sometimes you get really good gear for a lot cheaper than the new price. If this video was helpful for you, please leave it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to know a little more about cameras or which camera to choose. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this in the coming weeks, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.